Right, there's going to be two ways you can use this video. The first is you can turn the sound off and have a go at the exam questions. The second is leave the sound on and try and talk through the right answers and common mistakes people have made in this exam paper. So, question 1. A warm-up prepares the body for physical activity by increasing the temperature of the muscles. Describe 2 other physical benefits of a warm-up has on the muscular system. So first of all, you need to look at the muscular system. If you refer to anything else, you will not get a mark. So if I read this first, it says, many candidates were able to describe 2 benefits of warming up on the cardiovascular system. Some answers describe benefits of other systems, such as the cardiovascular system and respiratory systems, and these responses did not gain a mark. Okay, misconceptions. There is a misconception that warming up can prevent injury and prevent the buildup of lactic acid. The word prevent is not an appropriate word to use in these circumstances. Injuries may still happen. The correct word used is reduce. A warm-up can only reduce the risk of injury and reduce the buildup of lactic acid. So that pretty much is saying is that people who refer to the cardiovascular system, respiratory system didn't get a mark. People who put the word prevent didn't get a mark. So we talked about in class that we use the reduce, not prevent. So correct answers wise, what we're looking for here is to increase flexibility, pliability of muscles, increase range of movement, increase mobility, increase pliability of tendons and connecting tissues, increase more faster blood flow, oxygen to the muscles, increase speed and strength of contractions, reduce the risk of injury, delays or reduces the risk of lactic acid or the buildup of lactic acid, and delays fatigue. Okay, once again, it says if you use the word prevent, you do not get a mark. They're the answers we're looking for. So question 2, state the function of valves in the heart. Okay, so many answers correctly stated that valves prevent the backflow of blood. Blood is the key feature of this answer and is required to show an understanding of the function of valves in the heart. Now, what we found is some of you didn't use the word blood, you put prevent backflow, which you did not get a mark for. You put blood flow in one direction, you did not get a mark for either. Both of those were too vague. So we're looking for the prevent backflow of blood or prevent blood from returning to where it came from or preventing blood flowing in the wrong direction. So B, the bicuspid and tricuspid valves are structures of the heart. Name one other valve in the heart. So it says most answers named the semilunar valve. Some candidates named the aortic or pulmonary valves, and although the syllabus does not cover these names, they were marked as correct. However, other names for the bicuspid or tricuspid valves, such as the mitral valve, were not accepted. So you're looking here, mark-wise, you're looking for the semilunar valve, you're looking for the aortic valve, and you're looking at the pulmonary valves. It says do not accept the bicuspid, mitral, tricuspid, aortal, or pulmonary artery. So number 3, identify a synovial joint in the body that allows more than 2 types of movement. Okay, so most candidates identified the shoulder or hip joint or ball and socket joint as the correct answer. Other correct synovial joints were also allowed. Synovial joints allowed 2 types of movement did not gain a mark, and nor did joints that are not classified as synovial joints. So in order to get your mark, you're looking for the ball and socket joint in the hip and shoulder, the gliding condyloid, wrist and knuckle, or saddle in the base of the thumb. It says do not accept ankle, thumb, fingers on its own. Okay, so number 4, name the main muscle groups used and the plane of movement passes through while performing a sit-up. Now, many people got this wrong because they shortened the muscle names. You cannot shorten the muscle names. You are looking for the abdominals. If you put abs, you do not get a mark. Okay, the correct answer for the plane of movement is the sagittal plane. Right, number 5. Figure 5 shows the performance of a gymnastic move. Name the axis of rotation in figure 5. So we're doing a cartwheel, and that passes through the frontal axis. Okay, number 6, complete the following statement. The action of a bicep curl is an example of a what class lever? So we've done our lever systems before. We've obviously got the first is in the neck, the second is in the ankle, and the third is in your bicep. So you're looking for the third class lever. Right, number 7 shows a diagram that highlights one plane of movement. A, name the movement plane highlighted. So it says most candidates were able to state that the movement plane highlighted was the frontal plane. Responses that gave the wrong name for this plane were still able to gain a mark for B, the one below. So we're looking for frontal. B, identify a sporting skill that passes through the movement plane in figure 7. So it says, candidates are reminded that sporting examples must clearly show what movement has been performed that passes through a specific plane. Correct answers include performing a star jump or a cartwheel, in which the only movement is through the frontal plane. Sporting actions that involve more than one plane must be qualified to highlight the correct movement. For example, breaststroke leg kick moves through more than one plane, therefore does not gain credit. For this example to be marked correct, adduction or abduction at the hip during a breaststroke kick had to be stated. So it's really asking for you to be specific on your answer. So you're looking really for that cartwheel, okay, in order to get yourself a mark. So to be really specific on your answer. And actually, if you don't know the answer for A, make sure you still have a go at B, because it says you can gain a mark at B even if you don't get A right. So number 8 is a multiple choice. Okay. Which one of the following describes the correct pathway of air through the respiratory system? Now, common mistakes made for this was people put A as in they're breathing through the mouth, through the trachea, but we don't want that at all. Okay, we always talk about the nasal passage, so it's got to be through the nose, then through the trachea. So we're looking for B as your correct answer. Okay, number 9. A wet and slippery floor in a sports hall is a potential hazard. Identify 2 other hazards in a sports hall. So it says most candidates correctly identify at least one potential hazard in a sports hall. Some answers identified 2 different objects or a piece of equipment left on the floor. This only gained 1 mark. So if you say a gymnastics box on the floor, someone could trip over it. A football on the floor, someone could trip over it. That was only 1 mark. You had to put different examples. So for this, the answers which we are looking for, it says the floor is a hazard if it is too hard or uneven. Litter, objects, equipment left out, not put away in the wrong position. Equipment is damaged or broken or is unsafe. Inappropriate footwear being worn. Other participants, area too crowded. Other activities going on. Short runoff areas or close activities done close to the wall. Open doors, windows, blocked fire escapes, poor or unsuitable lighting. Okay, it says do not accept wet, slippery floor as it says that in the question. Okay, if you just put temperature is too hot or temperature is too cold or litter, you do not get a mark. You have to actually put litter on the floor which someone could trip over. You need to explain your answers in full, or you get that dreaded TV, which means too vague. Power is an important component of fitness required in many sports and can be measured by using the standing broad jump test. Name one suitable test for power that describes one feature of this test. So it says most candidates were able to name the vertical jump or sergeant jump test. Okay. Spelling, some people got it wrong, but this was allowed. Those candidates who could not name a suitable test but were able to describe a feature of the suitable test still gained a marks for number 2. The features had to be described. It was recognised that centres may carry out the vertical jump test in a variety of ways, and answers that showed an understanding of the test gained credit. So there you're looking for the vertical jump test or the sergeant jump test. If you put standing broad jump test, you did not get a mark. Okay, 1 mark for the second part was reach up and make a mark or slide a ruler up. Former jumps up and touches the board, marks wall or makes a chalk mark on the wall. Maximum score, height recorded or distance between the 2 marks is measured. Measure on how high you jumped by touching the ruler. So it's really describing and going into detail about that vertical jump test. Right, number 11. Describe the following key components of a warm-up using practical examples for each mobility and dynamic movement. Okay, people got in this one mobility and dynamic movement mixed up. Okay, so correct answers describe each component of a warm-up and gave a practical example for each. Candidates are reminded to read the question carefully. Some answers describe the components accurately but did not give a practical example, whereas others gave a good example but did not describe the component. You have to do both in order to get your marks. So, mobility, exercise that take the joint through its full range of movement, e.g. arm swings, heel flicks, high knees, open the gates, lunges. Dynamic movements, movements that involve speed and or changes of direction, shuttle runs, skipping, running out of cones, zigzag running, high knees, heel flicks, agility ladders. So it's not getting mobility and dynamic movement mixed up. Number 12. A cricket player has just caught a hard ball. Name a bone in the hand that is at risk from injury as a result of the impact of the ball being caught. So you're looking at bones in the hands. Now for this, you're looking for phalanges or metacarpals. If you just wrote carpals, you did not get a mark because that's in your wrist, not your hands. So the only answers you could get were metacarpals or phalanges. 13. Flexion and extension are 2 types of movement which are involved to allow circumduction around a joint. Name the other 3 movements needed for circumduction around the joint. For this one, you actually need 3 correct answers just to gain 1 mark. So you're looking for abduction, adduction, and rotation. 14. Describe one difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise. Give a practical example of each type of exercise. So most answers correctly stated that aerobic uses oxygen whereas anaerobic doesn't, and gave good examples of aerobic and anaerobic exercises. Some candidates got their examples the wrong way around, even though they had described a difference correctly. This suggests that they had not read the heading for each exercise properly. So, what you are looking for here is aerobic, continuous exercise, 3 minutes, low monetary intensity, oxygen in use, no oxygen debt, lactic acid not produced, CO2, H2O produced. For anaerobic, it's short bursts of exercise up to 30 seconds, high intensity, no little oxygen used, oxygen debt created, lactic acid is produced. Now you're then going down to your 2 examples. So for your aerobic, you're looking at any long distance event. I would always put the marathon because that's quite clear that it's a long distance event. For anaerobic exercise, you're looking for short sprints. So really that 100-meter sprint in order to gain your 2 marks. 15. Define stroke volume. It says many answers correctly define stroke volume. Some answers were incomplete and did not mention the heart or per beat. Some candidates confused stroke volume with tidal volume. So 15, we're looking for amount of blood pumped from the left ventricle or ventricles, heart per beat or contraction. So that's what we're looking for, that correct answer. So we're looking for the amount of blood pumped from your left ventricle in 1 contraction or 1 beat. Okay. Number 16. During exercise, cardiac output changes. Explain what is meant to the term cardiac output. So it says most candidates correctly defined cardiac output either as the volume of blood pumped out of the heart per minute or as heart rate times stroke volume. Some responses lacked one part of the definition and missed out on a mark as a result. Okay, so what we're looking for as the correct answer, we're looking for cardiac output equals heart rate slash heart rate times stroke volume, okay, or volume amount of blood pumped out of the left ventricle per minute. Okay, so state how cardiac output changes during exercise. So we've got most responses correctly stated that cardiac output increases during exercise. Some answers misread this question and explained why it changed during exercise. So simply writing increase or increases would have gained you the correct mark. Number 17. Number 17, describe the role of tendons during physical activity. Most answers correctly stated how tendons attach muscles to bone. Some incorrect responses describe the role of ligaments rather than tendons. So we're looking for connects muscles to bone, assists the muscles with pulling the bone, makes bones move when muscles contract, involved with muscular contractions, gives stability, support, shock absorbers. Okay, it says do not allow, if it just says allows movement at a joint, keep the joints together, hold bones and muscles in place, but holds muscles to bones. Okay, you need to make sure that you're actually really clear with your answer. So 18, describe capillarization. Capillarization is an increase in number of capillaries or an increase in capillary density. Many responses describe this process, including the information and use of new capillaries. Now it's got misconceptions. Some candidates stated that capillarization means a growth in capillaries or bigger capillaries. This is incorrect. Thicker walls or a larger lumen would inhibit the process of gaseous exchange, which requires a short diffusion pathway between the hemoglobins and alveoli. So in order to gain your mark for this one, it's just an increase in number of or more capillaries. Now, the next answer is capillarization is a short-term effect of exercise. and this is quite simply false. Okay, it is a long-term effect. Number 19. Name the type of interval training used when a performer alternates between short bursts of speed followed by a period of recovery. Okay, most responses correctly named high intensity interval training, or HIIT. Some stated fartlek training, but this is a form of continuous training and is therefore an incorrect answer to this question. Circuit training may involve a speed element, but it is not its main feature and was not accepted as a valid answer. The only answer for you to gain a mark for this is if you put high intensity interval training. Okay, number 20, give one example of personal protective equipment that will protect the cranium. Okay, so for this one, it's quite simple. For me, you can put a helmet. I would always link it to a sporting activity all the time. I would put a helmet which protects the cranium in cricket, okay, or a skull cap which protects the cranium in rugby. So link the list of protective equipment and what sport it relates to, just to make sure you get that mark. So 21 gives you a bit of information about different people, right? So shows the national norms of the sit and reach test from 16 to 19-year-olds, males and females. Shows a set of sit and reach results for a Gcse PE class. Name the fitness component that is measured using the sit and reach test. So this is quite simply, you're looking for flexibility, okay, and we should be able to get that right, knowing the different tests. Using the values in figure 21.1, state how many students in figure 21.2 are in the average range. So most candidates correctly identified that 2 students were in the average range, or name them as Abdul and Olivia. Both forms of answers were accepted. So that was just working out the average. So analyse the results in figure 21.2 and suggest reasons for the difference between students who were scored as excellent compared to those who were given a poor rating. So higher ability candidates explained that the most flexible students may have warmed up, had greater elasticity in their muscles, and may do sport that requires good flexibility, whereas those with poor scores may not have warmed up and did sports where the focus of training may be on other fitness components. They also explained that girls are generally more flexible than boys. So a misconception, the ability to analyse data or give reasons for differences in the results is a requirement of this subject. This meets assessment objective AO3. Some candidates state that the table showed by listing the scores of each student rather than considering why the results were different. You have to actually compare. In order to describe the difference between the two results, the use of direct comparisons or comparative language should be used. The following statement shows an example of a direct comparison. Those with excellent scores may have warmed up, and the person with poor scores may have not warmed up. Both parts of this sentence are required to gain a mark. The following statement is an example of comparative answer. The students with excellent scores may have had more elastic muscles. This is a correct answer as the question asks for differences, and the implication is that there is a difference between those with poor scores. So you have to actually compare. You can't just put the better people warmed up. You need to actually say the people who scored high warmed up and the people who poorer scores did not warm up. So you have to actually compare. You can't just state. So specific is one principle of training that allows a gymnast to focus on a relevant exercise suited to their routine. Using practical examples, explain the use of other principles of training in a gymnastics training program. Evaluate reasons why some gymnastics may use beta blockers within their training regime. And if you look at the top here, there is a little star by B, which means you need to write in detail. Okay, so most candidates knew that beta blockers slowed down heart rate and helped to calm a performer's nerves, and were able to apply this to a gymnastics performing a routine. Many responses identified the other three principles of training and explained that one of them applying their knowledge to a gymnast training program. However, answers were often superficial and did not show a clear understanding of how the principles of training should be applied. Some responses talked about progressive overload and credit was given. High ability candidates gave a clear explanation and practical examples for each principle of training and evaluated the benefits of beta blockers in detail, covering a wide range of reasons for their use. Candidates are reminded that credit is not given for answers that are not relevant to the question, such as negative effects of beta blockers and the consequences of being caught taking illegal substances. So a misconception, some candidates were not aware that the extended response question contained a hypnotic element that required knowledge of an area of the syllabus covered in paper 2. So it's actually going into a bit more detail. Okay, so really for this, you're looking for, in order to gain your correct answers, is one, you've got to write in detail, okay, and you need to actually cover a broad range of points. You need to actually go into what is overload, okay, how would that help a gymnastics routine? You could go into progression, and how would you progress a gymnastics routine in order to make them get better and stronger and adapting to different skills. Reversibility is if they stop training, the gains they have made, they will lose. Okay, you then need to go into the beta blockers to actually say what are the effects of them on a gymnastics. Okay, and how, but you once again it says not negative. You're looking for that it calms them down. Okay, you've got to write in detail in order for you to gain your answers. 22. Describe using a sporting example for each how the skeleton allows the following functions: protection, and then the second one, movement. Most candidates were able to describe how the skeleton protects vital organs and gave a sporting example, such as the cranium protects the brain when heading a football. High ability candidates also describe the function of movement using sporting examples. Candidates are reminded to read the question carefully. Many responses understood the function of the skeleton but did not use a sporting example to support their answer, which meant they did not get their marks. So we're looking for protection. Bones help to protect vital organs, e.g. the cranium protects the brain in rugby. Ribs protect the lungs during a collision and impact a tackle in rugby. Movement. Bones provide a surface for muscles, tendons to attach, or provide lever systems, or muscles pull bones when they are contracted, or has joints that allow the body to move, e.g. elbow joint moves to throw a ball in cricket. So suddenly we have explained what they have done, but in order to get your marks, you also have to link it to a sport. So B, name the leg muscles that contract during the extension phase of this exercise. Many candidates correctly identified the quadricep muscle. Centers are reminded that the use of shortened versions of muscles such as the quads are not accepted. So in order for this, you're very simple, adding the quadriceps, and you've got to write them in full. B. Explain how the pair of muscles at the knee work together during the extension phase of the exercise. So, many responses gave a full and accurate explanation of muscles working together as an antagonistic pair, with the quadriceps as the agonist and the hamstring as the antagonist. Some candidates described knee flexion, which was not required of the question. Candidates who mistakenly stated that hamstrings were the agonist and quadriceps were the antagonist could still gain credit if it was stated that the pair of muscles were working antagonistically. Okay? So, point 3, name 2 articulating bones at the hip during the movement in figure 2. Okay, ever so simple. You're looking for the femur, you're looking for the pelvis. Okay, ever so simple, write the 2 bones down and you get your mark. C, in the box below, draw and label the lever system used at the neck when heading a ball in football. So, most candidates drew a lever system. Some drew a picture of a head. Both were acceptable. Correct answers showed the fulcrum in the middle with the effort and load at either end of the lever. In the first class lever system used to head a football, the direction of both the effort and the load forces are downwards. Candidates are expected to show the correct direction in which the forces act, and when asked to represent lever systems using the diagram. So, what we're looking for you to have put, we want you to have put first class lever, so you're looking for a line with a fulcrum in the middle, the effort at one end, the load at the other, with both arrows pointing down. Describe the long-term effects of a 6-month training program on the heart. Many responses describe the long-term effects of training on the heart. High ability candidates recognised that 5 effects were required and wrote clear and concise descriptions. The use of bullet points was acceptable. Some candidates described respiratory or muscle adaptations. These were not relevant to the question, but did not prevent an answer scoring full marks if 5 correct effects of the heart were stated. Hypertrophy is a muscle adaptation, but if a candidate made it clear that hypertrophy of the heart muscle or cardiac hypertrophy was an adaptation, then the credit was given. So what we're looking for here is lowering resting heart rate. Okay, the heart becomes bigger, larger, cardiac hypertrophy. The heart becomes stronger contractions, increase of stroke volume, more blood pumped from the heart in one beat, increase in cardiac output, the volume of blood ejected from the left ventricle in 1 minute, increase in capillarization of the heart, reduce risk of heart attack, cardiac arrest, angina, CHD. Do not accept adaptations of blood, e.g. more red blood cells, reduce risk of strokes, lower blood pressure, blood pump faster, lower heart rate, heart walls get thicker. So if you can see those last ones, they put them down as too vague. You've got to go into detail in order to get your marks. The 23B. Describe the difference between the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein. Many responses correctly describe the pulmonary artery as a carrier of deoxygenated blood to the lungs, and the pulmonary vein as a carrier of oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart. High ability candidates also stated that the pulmonary artery takes blood from the right ventricle under slightly higher pressure than in the pulmonary vein, which transports blood to the left atrium. Some candidates described differences between the arteries and veins. These responses could only gain 2 marks. If difference in blood pressure, lunar size or thickness of vessel walls were correctly compared. So what we're looking for is the pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood, carries it to the lungs from the right ventricle, carries blood at high pressure, thick walls, smaller lumen. The pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart to the left atrium, carries blood at a lower pressure, thin walls, large lumen. So the last one. Name the blood vessels responsible for returning deoxygenated blood back to the heart to the right atrium, and that is the vena cava. So if you go through it, come in, any questions we can discuss in class. Thank you.